Okay, today we're going to be talking about manga. Hello everyone, it's Eiji, and as promised, today I will be talking about loads and loads of dark/horror manga. Now, this isn't a complete guide, of course, because otherwise I would be talking for hours, but this is just a general selection of pieces that I personally really enjoyed, and I think that if you're new to the genre, to this type of literature, or if you are a veteran, you might be able to find something that piques your interest that you haven't heard of before. At least that's what I'm hoping to achieve. So yeah, I have decided to split this video into 4 parts. The first part I will be talking about some pieces that are quite wholesome, not too scary, and the second category is really focused on psychological/thriller sort of manga, so it really focuses on the dark side of life. Then the third category is just loads and loads of messed up stuff, so if you're not into horror, like real gory stuff, then this category might not be for you, but if you are, this is the way to go. And then the last category contains loads and loads of works of Junji Ito, because at the moment he's the most popular horror manga artist, and rightfully so. Okay, so I'm going to take these pieces off of my desk and start with the first category. So the first one is Skull-Faced Bookseller Honda-san, and this was created by Honda-san and translated from the Japanese to the English by Amanda Haley. So the reason why I put this on the list is due to the fact that the main character is a skeleton, but besides that, there's not really anything scary about this manga in particular. Also, we will be watching a couple of episodes of the anime adaptation during Fortnight Frights, which is just super exciting. Anyway, yes, this manga is about a bookseller who works at a Japanese chain bookstore at the manga department. I believe he specializes in art books, and this manga essentially just covers his day-to-day life, what happens behind the scenes in terms of restocking and selling and dealing with publishers, etc., etc., but also the different types of manga fans that you'll meet at a bookstore. I have read the first volume. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very cool to kind of like see what goes on behind the scenes at a bookstore. I think especially if you're someone who has worked as a bookseller, this is going to be very interesting as well. And yeah, it's just very fun, a good story, and in total there are, I believe, 4 volumes. It has been completed at this time, so if you want to binge the series, you can. Then the next one I have is Junji Ito's Cat Diary, Yon and Mu, and this is actually the only piece of manga that I have found by Junji Ito that isn't really scary. So essentially this is a manga that centers around his and his wife's 2 cats, Yon and Mu. I don't know exactly which is which. Anyway, yeah, it's just kind of like these short anecdotes about their lives, and since this is created by Junji Ito, it is drawn in his style, which at times can be a bit extreme. Like, his wife is generally drawn without any pupils and he himself has like really weird, creepy sort of expressions at times, but it's in a way that it's not off-putting and it's actually quite funny. So if you're a cat person and you want to try Junji Ito's work, then I would definitely recommend this one. Next up we have the Poe Clan, this huge one, and it was created by Moto Hagio and translated from the Japanese to the English by Mari Morimoto. So this is actually quite an old shoujo series. I believe it was created around the 70s, 80s, around that time, and it's about vampires. So you have these two siblings, Edgar and Maribel, and they get turned into vampires as kids. And so they look like 14, 13, whilst they're actually 100 years old. And this series essentially follows them throughout the ages, the decades, and I have read this one. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very interesting to have kind of like all these characters that you see from like very young and then growing up, and then them staying the same, and them having to deal with having to move so often because they're not growing. And yeah, I just thought it was very interesting. And since this is like such an old series, it is drawn in like the classic shoujo style. So I think that's also kind of interesting if you're looking to find some manga that isn't drawn in the contemporary way. And what else is there to say? Oh, yes. So this is volume 1, and it was supposed to come in 2 parts, but the second volume as of yet hasn't been published. I don't know when it's going to be published, but this one was published about 2 years ago. So if you're Italian, I know that the Italian translation is complete. So if you can read manga in Italian, then I would recommend you get those ones. I think those are also a bit cheaper. Okay, yeah, so this was the Poe Clan. Then the last one that I have in this category is The Girl on the Other Side, and this was created by Nagabe and translated from the Japanese to the English by Adrian Beck. And I have volumes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I believe there are 7 or 8 volumes right now available in English, so I'm hoping to get my hands on that in the future. Anyway, this is, I guess, a sort of dark fantasy-esque manga series, and it centers around these 2 characters, this young girl named Shiva and this beast looking guy named Teacher. So this story is set in a land that has been split into 2. You have a dark and a light side, and there is this curse that can be transferred via touch. So if you catch this curse, you'll be transformed into a hideous beast, and the people on the light side call them outsiders, and they get shunned and hunted in order to prevent the spread. We follow along as Teacher, who is an outsider, tries to take care of Shiva, a girl who he found on the dark side of the woods, and he tries not to touch her, of course, because otherwise she'll get the curse as well. And yeah, I have read all 6 volumes that I have in my possession, and I think it's just so cute. And well, it's not completely wholesome. People die, and like the curse sometimes spreads, and etc, etc. But the wholesomeness of Teacher taking care of Shiva, it just does something with my heart. And just the story in general, I think it's very interesting. There are lots and lots of secrets which you get to unravel as you follow along, and it's just a great series. Moving on to the more psychological stuff, I have Downfall by Inyo Asano, and I do have a copy of this, but I just couldn't find it, so I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I will try to keep this summary a bit short because I have done a full video on this, so if you're interested in that, I will leave a link in the description box and put a card somewhere. Anyway, this is a dark tale about what happens when living your dreams eventually becomes your downfall. It follows a manga artist who just has finished his first and incredibly successful series, and now he has become disillusioned with the manga industry, and everything kind of like in his life is just not going too well to say the least. His marriage is in shambles due to the fact that both he and his wife don't spend time together. They're always working. She is a manga editor, and yeah, the manga really goes to some very, very dark places. But if you want to know more, then I definitely recommend watching my review. And yeah, the manga isn't afraid to go into very dark places. I personally thought it was very interesting to see how others perceive successful people and how they perceive themselves. Also, whenever I'm talking about Asano, I always get tons of people telling me to start reading Goodnight Punpun as well, which also ventures off into some pretty dark places. And I recently got the German box set, so I'm very excited to dive into that series and review it here on the channel. Moving on, I have No Longer Human by Junji Ito, and this was translated from the Japanese to the English by Jocelyn Allen, and this actually is an adaptation of the popular novel No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. If you're interested in knowing more about the novel, about my opinions, etc., I have done a full review that includes this manga and the novel and background information on the author, so I'll leave a link in the description box below. Anyway, this story is semi-autobiographical. Loads of the events that take place in this story actually happened to Dazai, and loads of them weren't good, to say the least. Dazai struggled with drug addiction, alcoholism. He was sexually abused as a kid. He tried several suicide attempts and what have you not, just like loads and loads of bad stuff. And all of the scary things that happen in the original novel, Junji Ito just takes and amplifies them with 100. This definitely is a tough book to get through psychologically, so just like a trigger warning for those who might think that this would really mess them up, because it's a very, very heavy tale, but nevertheless very interesting. And like I said, if you want to know more with regards to my opinions, etc., and the book, etc., then in the description box there's a link to my review. Then the last one in this category is Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi, and this was translated from the Japanese to the English by Daniel Komen, and this is a series that just recently started getting published in English. I think this volume came out in February and volume 2 came out a couple of days ago. Anyway, if you're able to read French, then I would recommend you get the French translation, because that one runs up to volume 7, and at the moment I think volume 8 or 9 just recently got published in Japanese. Anyway, this is a very messed up series. The story is about a boy named Seiichi and his mother Seiko. Now Seiko is a very overprotecting, overbearing mother. Now one day his family and his cousin's family go on a hiking trip, and all sounds quite well until something really, really disturbing happens, and Seiichi finds out that things haven't been alright with regards to Seiko, and it seems that they haven't been okay for a very, very long time. And yeah, that's kind of like all I can tell you without really spoiling the first volume. It's really creepy, very messed up, especially once you kind of like get to know what's going on and you read the volume again and you see certain things that just make you really, really cringe. So yes, I would definitely recommend this story if you're really into like messed up psychological stuff. So that was it for the second category. Moving on to the pretty creepy, scary, bit gory manga. Okay, so the first manga in this category that I would like to show you was also created by Shuzo Oshimi, and it is Happiness, and I have volumes 1 till 10, and this is actually the complete set. So if you're looking for a series to binge, then I would definitely recommend this one. Also because they're very easy to read through. I can show you. It's not very dialogue heavy, so I think you can finish one volume maybe in an hour or so if you're very focused, even less than that for the fast readers out there. Anyway, this is a vampire manga and it centers around a high school boy named Makoto who gets turned into a vampire, and so we follow along as he gets hunted by this weird, unknown, mysterious organization. And this is actually the thing that I particularly enjoyed about this series. We also get to see how his turning into a vampire affects the people around him. In particular, one of his friends, or actually kind of like his only friend, a girl named Gosho. And since he's a vampire, he doesn't change, but she ages like all of the other people. And it's just a very simple plot if you look at it. Nothing too like extraordinary happens, but it's kind of like this cool thing which you get to explore when you're writing about vampires, which is this phenomenon of being immortal whilst everyone around you just ages and dies. And yeah, I've been following this series for I think a bit more than a year, and I quite recently got the last 4 volumes, which I tried to stretch out over a couple of days, but I finished them in 2 days, unfortunately. And wow, I don't know, I really enjoyed this so much, and I'm definitely looking forward to do a review on this one. Do have to say, like, it's quite graphic at times, but then again, this is the category of like gore and stuff like that, so be aware. Then moving on, I have PTSD-Radio, and this is a horror anthology that was created by Masaaki Nakayama, and I don't know who did the English translation. It is only available in digital format. This actually is a Japanese copy of the first volume. Anyway, like I said, this is a horror anthology, so it contains these really short stories that aren't necessarily related to one another, but what they have in common is that they're centered around yokai, which are essentially Japanese monsters, spirits, and in particular it centers around this hair god, hair spirit, and weird stuff happens. It's really messed up, really creepy as well, and I have enjoyed it a lot. There are 6 volumes in total, and I've read all of them, and yeah, it's great. Would definitely recommend. I will also leave a link to the Kodansha webpage where you can find these. So yeah, read it and tell me what you thought. I know that there are some people who have found this to be a bit confusing, but I think that if you just keep in mind that all these stories aren't necessarily connected, that you'll be good and you'll know kind of like what to expect. Also, I do have to say that this has kind of like a moving picture thing going on as well. Like every couple of pages you'll see this weird illustration. I don't know, it's not gonna show well here, but you'll see first it kind of starts with black pages, and then it keeps on going, and this goes like throughout all these volumes, and if you put them together it's like an animation, which is cool. I know that one person kind of like did that and I think put it on YouTube, but I couldn't find it. But if I do, I will leave a link in the description box. Then I have a Yuri horror, and this is Scarlet, and this was created by Chiri Yuino and translated from the Japanese to the English by Jennifer Ward. And when I picked this up, I just thought it was going to be a horror. I didn't know that it was like a Yuri horror that got published in like a Yuri magazine, but I was pleasantly surprised. Like, I thought this was a very good first volume. It was really interesting. Essentially, it's about this girl named Fine, and she lives in a world in which there's this drug that if you take it, you'll become thirsty for human blood, or just, I think just essentially you'd like to eat people. Anyway, you kind of just become a vampire, and this drug is of course illegal because you don't want people killing one another. Anyway, like I said, a situation presents itself where she kind of like is forced to take this drug, and now she thirsts for human blood. There is, however, a person who can help her, and that is this girl Iris, and she actually is a werewolf, and turns out that if Fine drinks her blood, she all of a sudden doesn't want to drink human blood. So they have essentially made an agreement that Fine can feed off of Iris, with the condition that eventually Iris is allowed to eat Fine because she's a werewolf. She eats humans. And yeah, that's essentially what this story is about. I've read this, I really enjoyed it. It's not very often where you get to see these two genres cross, so that was very interesting. I do have to say that at the moment only one volume is available, and there are 2 volumes in total, but the last volume got published about a year, 1.5 years ago, so it might have been cancelled. I'm not too sure. So I would say don't get too invested in this series. Then moving on, I have The Strange Tale of Panorama Island, and this was created by Suehiro Maruo, and it is based on a tale that was written by Edogawa Rampo, and it was translated from the Japanese to the English by Ryan Sands and Kyoko Nita. I won't talk about this one too much because I've actually done a single review video for this one, so if you're interested in that, link in the description box. Anyway, this story is about a man who is a writer. He isn't very successful, and so he lives essentially in poverty. He had a friend in university, I believe, who really looked like him, and that guy came from a very rich family. Unfortunately, he passed away. And when this writer hears this news, he decides to dig up the grave of his old friend, dispose of the body, and essentially act as if he was buried alive, that he actually didn't die. It only looked as if he was dead. And that's how he takes over his old friend's life. And so he essentially inherits all of his money, and he decides to create this huge amusement park on an island that is targeted towards adults. and that's what the story is all about. Like I said, I did a full review on it. I enjoyed it a lot. It was wild, it was great, the art was beautiful, the edition as well is stellar, hardcover, thick paper. It's just a quality product, and yeah, quality story as well. It's just really good, so I would recommend it. Although, again, we're in the pretty scary category, so might not be for everyone. Then I have The Hound and Other Stories by Go Tanabe, and this was translated from the Japanese to the English by Zach Davison, and these are actually just adaptations of H.P. Lovecraft's short stories, at least some of them. I believe it contains, of course, The Hound and The Temple. I'm not too sure. I think, yeah, the Temple, The Hound, and The Nameless City. I read this one, I believe, 2 or 3 months ago, and just remember being horrified by some of the stuff. It was really good, really interesting. I think that if you love kind of like these Lovecraftian themes, of course, these are his short story adaptations, you'll enjoy this one as well. It has this feeling of like huge, big entities and religions and stuff that you'll never understand, and like these, it's just Lovecraftian essentially, and yeah, I would recommend it. Then moving on, the last 2 pieces of manga in this category are actually both classics, and this one is Parasyte, and it was created by Hitoshi Iwaki and translated from the Japanese to the English by Andrew Cunningham. It's, I guess, a horror / dystopian science fiction manga, and it centers around this high schooler named Shinichi. So you have these really creepy parasites who are trying to invade people's brains, eat them, and just take over their bodies. And this almost happens to Shinichi. He manages to fend off this parasite, but it still manages to take over his hand. And so now Shinichi and this parasite, who gets called Migi, coexist together. The thing is, with these parasites, once they take over these humans, they want to eat other humans, and Migi doesn't know why, and Shinichi definitely doesn't know why, and so they try and uncover that, and they try and survive, because these parasites also recognize that Shinichi isn't the same as them. So they try and kill them, and that's what this story is all about. At least that's what I get from reading the first volume. This was, I think, created in the 80s, if I'm correct, or 90s. Anyway, it has loads and loads of interesting ideas with regards to how we humans kind of like mess up this entire world, you know, survival of the fittest, etc., etc. It raises loads and loads of interesting ethical questions as well. So if you're interested in horror that kind of, I guess, goes a bit deeper, then I would definitely recommend Parasyte. Now, before we start looking at more of Ito's work, I would like to show you this series, and I know a lot of you have seen these like in my bookshelves and have asked me about this series, and today I am here to talk about it. This is The Drifting Classroom by Kazuo Umezu, and this was translated from the Japanese to the English by Sheldon Jishka. This is a children's horror manga that was serialized back in the 70s, and me saying that this was targeted towards children doesn't take away that this is a pretty scary and messed up series. Ito actually read this one whilst it was being serialized as a kid, so it's really cool to see also the influence that Umezu has had on Ito, but that's a conversation for another video. Anyway, The Drifting Classroom. This is, I guess you could call this a dystopian. It is about this group of school kids. Their entire middle school, I believe, gets transported to a desert wasteland, and no one knows what has happened. They're just there. There's almost nothing left, and they have to face several different challenges, such as huge insect-like bug beasts that have come to eat them and their foods. Initially, there are also teachers, but those turn out to be rather dangerous as well. They meet robots. There's just loads and loads of things that happen in this series, and it's really interesting, really good. Would definitely recommend this. Okay, so we have finally come to the last part of this video, and we'll be talking about Junji Ito and his work. Ito is like one of my favorite manga artists of all time. I have an entire section of my shelves dedicated to his work. The thing that I really like about his work in particular is the fact that he manages to find the scary in places where you would initially not think there to be anything scary. Like, for instance, this piece, Uzumaki, this one centers around spirals. And you're just thinking, what's so scary about spirals? This book will tell you what's so scary about spirals. And another thing that I really like about his work is the lack of character development, if that makes any sense. So his characters are, for the most part, rather flat, and usually that would be kind of like a negative point with regards to work generally. But the way these characters act make it very comedic, very funny as well. Like, for instance, there's this one girl who meets up with one of her old friends from high school, and this friend brings along her boyfriend, and this girl is like, ooh, her boyfriend, cute. And then like the next page she's like, so I took him. And it's just like, what? Where all the dynamics? Like, what happened? What happened? And I don't know, for me that's just really hilarious, and it's nice to have something to laugh at when the rest of the manga is just really creepy. There's loads of like body horror, gore going on. So yeah, I just think it's like a very fun and quirky balance. But yeah, so I have loads and loads of his work in front of me. These are all of like the English pieces that are generally like not out of print at the moment. So if you were to start with Junji Ito and you would like to have a taste of what his style is, what he's all about, I would recommend Fragments of Horror, Smashed, Shiver, and Venus in the Blind Spot. And this is actually the most recent piece that got published in English. So these are all short story collections, and that's kind of like where I would say is the best place to start, because Junji Ito stories are, well, they're all creepy, yes, but there is quite a lot of diversity. It's never kind of like this formulaic type of stuff, if that makes any sense. And so trying out his short story collections is definitely a good way to kind of like see what his capabilities are, what his range is. Definitely Venus in the Blind Spot, because I believe this got published in the Japanese under the title like The Best of Junji Ito, so it includes loads of his classics, and I believe you have about 3 short story adaptations as well as 5 original pieces, and these are generally like his most popular stories, like the Human Chair is very popular. Which one? Uno Momento. Yeah, you have The Licking Woman, which is really gross, but also very popular, and definitely The Enigma of Amigara Fault. I would say that that is definitely the most popular story, at least amongst English readers. So yeah, this actually would be on the top of my list, and then you can choose whichever with these 3. I like them all. Then if you're looking for like longer works of Ito, I would suggest Frankenstein, and this one is split into 2 parts. The first is an adaptation of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and the last part contains short stories. So if you're interested in having both a taste of like his longer work, which is like I believe about 200 pages, and some of his shorter work, then this would be a good collection. Now, if you're looking for a one-shot, I would recommend The Dissolving Classroom, not The Drifting Classroom, The Dissolving Classroom. I mixed the 2 up, so yeah. Anyway, this is about a boy, a high school boy, and his little sister, and essentially wherever they go, people just start to melt, their brains start to melt, and this girl's very happy with that because she enjoys slurping up the brain stuff. So yeah, I was really disgusted by this one. This is, to be honest, my least favorite one, I think. So yeah, I don't know, it was for me, it was kind of like borderline. There's just something about people drinking like brain slush that doesn't really vibe with me. Then moving on, we have 3 larger or longer pieces, and I have spoken about these before, I think last year around Halloween as well, so I won't try to talk too long about these 2. Oh, this one, they're all upside down. Okay. Yeah, here we go. So we have Tomie. Okay, no, this is not the correct way. Okay. We have Uzumaki, which I mentioned before, and Gyo. So I will start with this one because it's actually my least favorite of the 3. This is a story about rotting fish that comes out of the ocean, walking on what seems like bionic legs. Yeah, they come on land and they essentially try and kill people, and it's just really weird and messed up and gross. And if you're someone who doesn't really vibe with the smell of rotting fish or just bad smells in general, and also like spiders, insects, stuff like that, this is not a good book for you. I can tell you, because this one really like messed me up. Moving on. We have Tomie, and this is a manga that centers around Tomie, who essentially is a femme fatale. So everywhere she goes, boys just go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs over her, and they are just smitten. They love her and they're obsessed, and this obsession turns dark really, really fast, and people kill her. But she can't die, so she keeps coming back to haunt them, and it's messed up but really good. There are loads and loads of people who love Tomie, so this is also one I would really recommend. And then we have my favorite, Uzumaki, and I have spoken about this one before in this video. It's about spirals. in this manga, people go crazy because of the spiral. They either completely fear it, or they just become completely obsessed with it. And just to see like how people lose their mind over this shape is really eerie, very scary, and yeah, like it's hard to sell this like, oh, this is a horror manga about a spiral, about a shape, like but like I'm telling you, this is really creepy. And actually I think Tsunami, like the American company, I don't know who, but someone is making an adaptation of this manga series, and I am so here for it. It's set to come out next year, and it's going to be in black and white, which usually doesn't happen with anime, so it will be really interesting to see how close they stay to, I guess, the source material, because the last time that like loads of stories got adapted by Junji Ito was 2 years ago with the Junji Ito collection, which came out, and I know that quite a lot of people were disappointed with how it turned out. Gyo was adapted a couple of years back as well, and I watched that a couple of weeks ago, and gosh, it was bad. Like, it was really bad. Wow. So yeah, it has been a while since we've actually had a good Ito adaptation, so I'm really looking forward to it. I've seen a couple of pictures of like the productions and stuff, and it looks really good. I have hope that it will be a good one. So I think that is about everything, all of the manga that I wanted to show all of you. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that at least one title piqued your interest. Anyway, that's everything I had to say. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me or the readathon, then I have a link to like a page where you can donate to Fortnight Frights. This took so much time to create everything, the journals, the idea, the structure, the video, etc, etc. So like a donation helps so much. And yeah, if you want to support me just in general, I have a Patreon. I'll leave a link in the description box below, and you can also get me a coffee. I'll put the link to that also in the description box. And last thing, you can also just support me by liking, subscribing and commenting as always. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video.